Most of us are still in a lockdown. We hear a lot of promising news about how efficient some of the vaccines are, and we see amazing things happening in Israel. What we will try to do today is to answer the ultimate question: how will we fly this summer? Welcome everyone at another webinar by AviaDev. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Juraj Toth. I'm the Managing Director at AviaDev Europe. And let me welcome all of you who are joining us today for this very special session with Dirk Singer. Dirk works as a research director at Simpliflying. He produces daily newsletter with updates on how aviation, travel, and tourism are responding to the ongoing pandemic, what measures are here to stay, how travel will look like in the part vaccinated world, and other related topics. Dirk is one of the few people out there following this topic very closely from the very beginning. So that's why I'm really glad that he's here with us today.
Hi, thank you, Uri, and hello, and welcome everyone.
Thanks a lot for joining us for something what will be very interesting discussion and very relevant for, for everybody, whether we work in aviation, tourism, or travel or not. We all want to hear what are the plans of the industry for summer. What are the odds that it will be a bit better summer than it was last year? I remember CEO of London Southend Airport said recently that we just cannot afford to have two disaster summers in a row. Obviously, the last summer was considered as disaster, and this one hopefully will be a bit better. So before we dive into the topic, Dirk, why don't you share with us some very interesting things what you guys at Simpliflying are doing?
Yeah, so our background is we've been mainly sort of a marketing-led consultancy over the past 12 years. And we've worked with about 100 airlines and airports worldwide. But like a lot of people in the space, and like many of you in the call today, I mean, we've pivoted our business with the onset of COVID. And since the spring of last year, we have been trying to offer solutions to kickstart aviation and to kickstart travel. And there's a few things that we did. We first of all, over the summer and autumn, we launched something called the Launchpad, which was an accelerator program where we put together promising startups who were offering solutions in everything from biosafety to testing, and in touch with airline and airport partners. And we've since moved on to offering actual testing solutions. And we've launched a brand called Fit to Fly. And one of the first projects that we'll be doing is we'll be working with an airline in Latin America and in Mexico in terms of offering tests to the United States. So, as I said, so a year ago, had you told me this is what I'd be doing, I would have never believed it, but I'm sure it's the case of, just about everyone on this call.
Absolutely. So why don't you set the scene for what we are going to talk about today? So let me share my screen, and the floor is yours, Dirk.
Okay. Yes, I put together some. I mean, if we just go through some of the slides, I put together some introductory slides on 12 COVID travel predictions for 2021. Now, this probably makes it seem as if I'm a pessimist. I'm not. I'm actually quite optimistic about this year, which we'll go to talk about. Yep, I've kind of already gone through that, just who we are and what we've done. So I'll quickly talk about 12 trends and predictions. And if we just move to the next slide, I'll just talk through them one by one. So just a number of things that we've seen, at the start of this year and ongoing, and 12 things. The first trend that I've picked up is a form of flight shaming. Now, as all of you will know, the original flight shaming was a term that was coined, especially in Northern Europe, all about green issues, about the fact that you shouldn't be flying and should be, and it was a movement in countries like the Netherlands and Sweden to shame people, especially who are frequent flyers, about burning their carbon footprint. This is a different type of flight shaming that we're seeing now. And it's come very much in the onset of Christmas, where there's been a lot of coverage in the media in Europe and also in North America about people who've gone on vacation, who've gone on holiday, that they're perceived as being reckless and selfish and spreading the virus. And one of the touch points of that was the number of so-called social media influencers who are going to Dubai. I mean, certainly it was a phenomenon that I saw here in the UK, where the popular press picked up about Instagrammers, traveling to Dubai for Christmas and taking pictures of themselves in front of the Burj Al Arab. But I gather it's also a Europe-wide phenomenon. My Danish colleague tells me that in Denmark there was a term coined called Dubai shaming for the amount of people who were going on holiday. Of course, the numbers of people who were doing this was actually quite small, but it provided a suitable lightning rod, for a certain amount of outrage to be generated about people supposedly going off to a party while the rest of us were stuck in our homes. And obviously, on the back of that, is the new strains have very much, changed everything. I mean, it really raised the fear, around the British, the Brazilian, and particularly the South African variant, which is supposedly not as much more resistant to the vaccines, and that in turn has raised pressure on governments to tighten things up. If you move on to the next one. The result of that is that travel bans are popular. Certainly in Western Europe and in North America. I mean, in the UK, I've seen polls saying that 2/3 support a complete flight ban until the numbers go down. And in Canada, I've seen figures that show about 80% do the same. Is that, obviously public opinion is fickle. I do expect this to change as we move into the spring and summer, but certainly for now, the fear about new variants and about disease being imported via travel is causing a lot of pressure on governments to tighten up, led partially by the media as well. And of course, travel bans is something very, very obvious that governments can do. It's a very visible sign that you're tough and that you're doing something. And as travel bans are popular amongst people who don't work in the travel industry, it means there's actually very little political capital for governments to be lost by doing this. And then added on to that, restrictions will get tougher before they loosen. I know we have some participants from Israel on the call, and yesterday I saw in the media that Israel will be limiting arrivals to 200 a day from next week. So despite the speed of the vaccination program, border controls are still very, very tight. I also saw that Kuwait, a country which is, I believe, vaccinated 5% of the population, obviously the Gulf states are also making progress in vaccinations, have closed land and sea borders till the 30th of March due to COVID. And there are also very restrictive practices in place in terms of air arrivals. So things will toughen before they loosen. Travel restrictions will be the last to go. Biosafety measures are key for the consumer experience. And one of the things we talked about very, very early on in Simplifying is the 3 S's. So safety, obviously, sustainable business, so sustainability, but also practice and also sanitation. And biosafety will be a key part of the consumer offering, of the passenger experience, and of the overall travel experience. And testing is here to stay. I mean, obviously, we know that many areas of the world will not see vaccinations until 2022, 2023. Some form of testing will stay with us in the medium to long term. In the short term, even countries that have, that are fairly fast in terms of vaccinations, of course, one thing to remember is children for the moment, even that are not being vaccinated. So if you are traveling with your children on a summer vacation or summer holiday, some form of testing will probably still need to be in place, but certainly we see this being in the medium term. In some countries, vaccinations will ease travel. So if we look at the Seychelles, it's one of the first ones to announce that if you have that if you've been vaccinated with an approved vaccine, you will no longer have to quarantine on arrival. You will have to take a PCR test. I believe the same in Georgia. A number of European countries, so Romania and Iceland, are waiving quarantine for EFTA and EU nationals, and that's a trend, obviously, that we expect to see, carrying on. But one of the things to look out for is a possible travel vaccine hierarchy. So everyone will see the news that the AstraZeneca vaccine is supposedly not as effective towards mild to moderate illness in South Africa. It may, of course, still prevent serious illness, which is the key thing. Then some countries have brought in the Sinovac vaccine, which only showed, well, I say only in quotation marks, 50.3% efficacy, which, by the way, is still more than the annual flu vaccine. So it could well be that the travel restrictions vary by the type of vaccine that you have, and certain vaccines will be better at getting into certain countries, which will also matter when it comes to health passports. And we could also see a role again for antibody tests. So has a vaccine actually worked for that to be given to you? The age of the pandemics is here. So obviously, what's happened to all of us over the past year has very much been imprinted onto the public consciousness. COVID vaccines could be an annual thing. The media is already looking onto the next pandemic. Dr. Mike Ryan of the WHO famously said that this, what we're seeing now, is not the big one. the big one is still to come, in the future. And then finally, environmental and pandemic concerns will merge. I mentioned Dr. Mike Ryan from the WHO. He gave quite a well-publicized speech the other day, in which he actually talked about the fact about how he felt how human encroachment on the environment was causing diseases such as COVID to proliferate. And one of the things that I'm expecting to see is for environmental campaigners in future who target the travel agency and aviation to say, another good reason why, why we need to become more sustainable is we don't want something like COVID to happen again, because human encroachment on the environment makes zoonotic diseases much more likely.
Thanks a lot for the introduction, Dirk. First question is about the vaccination. So we see lots of positive messages about how efficient some of the vaccines are, Pfizer, BioNTech, also AstraZeneca, that they are not just stopping people from getting the virus, but they are also very efficient in avoiding spreading the virus. So we heard also a couple of days ago information from S&P Global Rating calculations. They expect that adults, 70% of adults in European Union should get a vaccine by late July 2021, and those who are older than 65 years should get it by April. So say also very similar figures for UK and US. So in very general opening question about vaccines. So how this speed in vaccination what this will mean for the summer, for the air travel in summer?
Yeah, I mean, obviously all of the news that we've had about the vaccines has been very good so far. I mean, I'm also aware that results were published in Scotland yesterday, the UK being reasonably far ahead in terms of vaccination program, which showed hospitalizations, decreased by 18 to 90% amongst recipients of both the AstraZeneca Oxford and amongst the BioNTech and Pfizer vaccine, which is great news. There are also some very encouraging statistics coming out of Israel in terms of the way that the Pfizer BioNTech vaccine is working, especially when it comes to transmission, which is the key point. Because I remember reading, as long ago, at the end of last year, when the New Zealand government already said that, that in 2021 they would probably not be opening up until it was shown that the vaccines could prevent transmission. Now, obviously, if more data does come through that the vaccines do prevent transmission, then that meets the main objection has been to opening borders. And of course, the main problem that we've been grappling with has not been so much about in-flight transmission, about the dangers of, you getting sick in an aircraft. It's always been about the transport of the virus. And of course, there's been a number of very high-profile studies that were conducted last year. There was an Irish one that came out just yesterday or over the weekend, claiming that in 2021, that the second wave was actually caused by Irish holidaymakers coming back to Ireland and re-spreading COVID. So if there is firm data that shows that the vaccines are putting a stop to that, then that's obviously very, very positive news, all around. And that in turn, leads to the type of agreements that, for example, that Israel has just signed with Greece and Cyprus, allowing for corridors between people who've been vaccinated.
Yeah, we already mentioned Israel a couple of times today. I mean, it's natural because they are the fastest country globally with the highest speed, highest rate of vaccination. So what do you think was crucial for this success, and what potentially the other countries, the other governments can take away from this?
Well, I mean, I'm not a sort of, I'm not based in Israel, but just sort of from more back what I know, I know that the Israeli government has agreed to share data with Pfizer, on the effectiveness and on the rollout of the vaccine program. That was a reason why Israel was able to to secure a large number of of doses early. I also understand that the way that the rollout is happening has been very, very efficient. The use of 24-hour clinics and so on. So that's a key reason for them leaping ahead in terms of other countries. When it comes to vaccine rollout. But as you say, the rest of us are not that far behind. I've seen that the UK government certainly is expecting the over 50s, to have a first dose by April. So almost 2 months from now. Everyone to have one in July. And as you say, for the European Union, even though there have been some supply issues, those should be resolved quite quickly. because obviously we'll be having more vaccines coming on stream. I mean, the Johnson vaccine, should be approved very soon. It's already used in South Africa. The Novavax vaccine should also, come on stream in the spring. And that means that there'll be more vaccines and a greater supply, for us to vaccinate a larger share, of the population.
There is another topic which is being discussed quite a lot for weeks or months now, and this is the acceptance of different kind of vaccines. And you already touched it in your initial slides as well. So, what's the current status? What do you see happening in the world? Are there potentially some countries who will not accept people with, I don't know, Chinese or Russian vaccine? As there were some discussions about that.
Absolutely. I mean, I think it's obviously it's too early to tell, but it will be interesting to see that if what will happen if you travel, for sake of argument, to the United States, and the FDA has for the moment, I believe, only authorized the Pfizer-BioNTech and the Moderna vaccine. We'll probably do the same for Johnson & Johnson and Novavax and possibly AstraZeneca in the future. What happens if you arrive with a vaccine that has not been approved? And it'll be interesting to see how different countries treat if you come with a vaccine that's not on the list, which will obviously be quite common, because even in Europe, I'm aware that, for example, that Serbia and Hungary have had deliveries of the Sputnik vaccine and also of the Sinopharm vaccine, which is also in use in the UAE. So it'll be an interesting sort of topic to see how that develops over the coming months.
Yep. Obviously, the second biggest topic I would like to discuss today is testing, and they all work together. So it's not just vaccination or testing, or any other thing that will take us through this alone. These all need to work together. And so I think one of the most obvious question is, what about those who will not get their jab, let's say in May or June, and then they would like to go for a holiday? So what do you think? How realistic is it that they will be even allowed to go on a plane and to fly to some holiday destinations?
Well, I think you have to, because otherwise you're only allowing adults to travel, and you're basically putting a block to family holidays. Because even in the United States, I mean, I gather that Dr. Fauci has said that there's some plans to start vaccinating children from the autumn. And I'm not sure what the sort of what the plans are here in Europe, but it seems unlikely that children will be vaccinated until the end of the year. So you have to have some kind of mechanism that allows families to travel. If the adults have been vaccinated, the children have not. For some kind of test to take place. I guess there's two things to say about testing. So first of all, is that testing will be with us in the medium term. I mean, as we mentioned, of course, a lot of countries won't have the majority of their population vaccinated until 2022, or maybe even 2023, if you believe some reports. And there has to be some kind of way for travel to happen. But the good news is that testing is becoming a lot simpler. Obviously, as you know, PCR tests are the so-called gold standard in terms of tests, and I'm seeing a lot of developments. Even PCR tests are becoming easier and cheaper. So to give you one example, one product that I saw last week comes from an American startup called Visby, and they've produced basically throwaway PCR kits that work in square-shaped boxes. You take the test, it gives you a result in half an hour, and you throw. Now, at the moment, those tests are quite expensive. But the point is that if you think about how the testing landscape has evolved over the past 6 to 12 months, I expect it to evolve even further, over the coming 6 to 12 months. Then we have testing solutions in place, like one being developed by an Israeli company called Nanoscent, which is a nasal breath test. Now, they claim accuracy or sensitivity of 80%, which is probably not good enough for a primary test. But it is good enough when you think about the type of thing, especially as it only takes 30 seconds. 30 seconds costs $10. It's the kind of test you can do as a backup, let's say at the gate, on arrival, on check-in. So it's encouraging to see those types of testing solutions gathering speed, and being developed.
I have a very specific question about antigen tests, because they are, I think I'm based in Slovakia, and we are probably the one of the few countries out there who are massively testing, especially with antigen tests. I mean, if I want to bring my daughter to a kindergarten, I have to have a test every single week. But at the same time, there are even the best of the antigen tests. They are relatively unreliable, so they don't even have those 80% accuracy. So do you see that some countries are also using that in terms of travel, or the focus is on PCR tests being the golden standard, as you said?
Yeah, I mean, most countries, restricted to a PCR test, but two, quite major exceptions are the UK and the US, which do allow you to take an antigen test before travel. I guess it's quite important to sort of differentiate what they do. I mean, as we know, antigen tests are not as good as picking up asymptomatic cases, and antigen tests are most useful at detecting if you are infectious right now, whereas PCR tests or molecular tests like RT-LAMP are best at detecting if you are a transporter or a carrier of the virus. So for me, the best testing example I've seen an airline do has actually been Delta on their trials from JFK in Atlanta to Rome. And they use a 3-test system. And this test system actually avoids quarantine, which is you first of all do a PCR test, which you do either 48 or 72 hours before departure. Then at the gate in Atlanta, you're given a rapid antigen test. Then when you arrive in Rome, you give another rapid antigen test. Now, the Mayo Clinic who designed this testing program for Delta, they reckoned that the risk of in-flight transmission was less than 1 in a million based on 6% capacity. Now, obviously, we're talking about transport of the virus, but it then, you'd expect that the chances of the transport of the virus would also be very, very low. Because if the first PCR test does not pick up, your infection, like let's say if the viral load is not high enough, or you were just infected yesterday, the chances are that those antigen tests, those 2 antigen tests will. Because you're already talking about 3 or 4 days, after departure. So I see the future, and going back to your earlier question about how can things work if you're not vaccinated, is a mix and match of PCR and antigen. So PCR to take beforehand, take it at home, let's say through a home test kit, to make sure that you're not a carrier, and then for rapid tests, just to be there as a safety block to make sure you're not infectious there and then, or to pick up anything that might have been missed by the first PCR test.
Yeah, at the same time, those PCR tests are still relatively expensive. So do you see, or when do you see those PCR tests becoming more affordable? Because now when I want to travel with a family, like let's say 2 adults and 2 kids, it can be a couple of €100 just for the tests.
It can. I mean, obviously, the sort of in Europe, the cheapest that I've seen is essentially in Frankfurt Airport, I believe, offers it at €59, which is a relatively low cost for a PCR test in the European market. I believe before they closed the airport in Israel, I believe there was a subsidized program in place where the tests were being offered for $30. But certainly, I mean, tests are becoming easier, tests are becoming cheaper, tests are becoming faster, which is something that all of us want to see.
Good. We have a very specific question from Ian K from Israel, which we mentioned already today a couple of times. Ian works as operations director at Vant Technology, and he has very specific questions. So do airlines have a duty of care to insist that they will only carry passengers that present a valid vaccination certificate?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously, bearing in mind what we said about children, it's not going to be something that's going to be possible in 2021 anyway, bearing in mind that children are not going to be vaccinated. From 2022 onwards, I mean, quite possibly. And the point is, only allowing vaccinated people eventually to board aircraft is quite popular. I mean, Qantas, is one of the main airlines which sort of talked about this first. And I believe that Alan Joyce mentioned opinion polls in Australia saying that 80% plus of the population were in favor of a policy like this. I think that sort of at the end of the day, airlines will have no choice. That if a country requires a vaccination certificate to enter, then obviously airlines will have to enforce some kind of check-in in the same way that they would to make sure that you have the correct visa. So I suspect this will be a decision that will be forced on the airlines one way or another.
Mm-hmm. We already have a question here in the Q&A section. So this is also a reminder for all of you who are with us today. If there is a question on your mind, feel free to type in the Q&A section. And here we have a question from Eden Walsh. Do you think that the summer will be prolonged so October and November will become high travel months, considering that, the vaccination will be kicking in somewhere later?
Yeah, I mean, I think that sort of that's a very good point. I think that we could well see a sort of sort of the summer happening in the late summer, so the sort of September or October. I personally think that some summer travel will be possible. I think that we may well see a slight improvement this summer based on last summer. Obviously, we're more likely to see short-haul routes recover first, and there'll be no travel to, Australia or New Zealand, at least until Christmas. I think that's something that we can be fairly certain. But on holiday routes, for example, to the Mediterranean, so to Spain, Italy, what have you, obviously Greece and Cyprus, economies which are very, very reliant on tourism, they are very, very keen for some kind of scheme to be in place, which is why both the Greek and Cypriot governments have pushed the idea of health passports, as a way to allow, some kind of summer holidays to take place.
Now I have a very specific question about Easter holiday. We heard, especially Michael already was very vocal about that in many of his interviews in November or December, that he believes that Easter holiday, Easter time will be the time when we will have many people already vaccinated and the industry will be starting to recover. Looks like he wasn't completely right. What do you think?
No, I mean, I think that it would be, even if there was the political will for governments to introduce something like that to open up the borders in Easter, I don't think it's where the public mood is. I don't think that, that it would go down well with public opinion in general to say you can go on holiday, but you still can't go to your local cafe or you still can't meet your friends. And so that's why, very, very simply, we're not going to see, sort of any reopening at Easter. I mean, obviously it's not practical in terms of the sort of vaccination, or that's in terms of health measures, but it's not where the public mood is sitting right now. I think the public mood will change, and they'll be prepared to sort of to accept travel from the summer. As you say, when we start to see widespread vaccinations across Europe, but Easter, which is 6 weeks away or so, no, I mean, I don't see it.
Good. Another major topic I would like to discuss today is digital health passports, which is also a thing that it's been talked about quite a lot. Obviously, IATA has already come up with some initiatives in this field. They are already announced. Emirates and Etihad being one of the first global airlines to join this initiative with IATA digital travel passports. So, can you share with us what are the newest, hottest news in this area?
So the bottom line is that there's a lot of health passport schemes out there. And I remember even as far back in September, in one of our Simplifying launchpad events, one of our airline partners in the United States told us that she'd been approached by 40 different health passport providers trying to get them on board. I don't think that, that we're going to have a situation where there's only going to be one app or one health passport used. But of course, the key is going to have to be interoperability. Because what you don't want, is if you're flying on a flight from, I don't know, from sake of argument, from Paris to Moscow and onto Tokyo, is you don't want to have 3 different apps and 3 different health passports you want to deal with. You want just one, and for it to be accepted. And on that score, there are a number of very promising initiatives. And one of the ones that I was aware of last week was one called Good Health Pass, which is a consortium from different bodies, including MasterCard and IBM, to work towards some kind of standard or some kind of interoperability, between the different health passports out there, and some kind of standardization of the data. Obviously, I'm also very aware of the work that IATA is doing with with its travel pass. IATA has been in discussions with a number of governments. Certainly, if the media reports are to be believed, governments are responding favorably to that, because there's no way around, having a health passport. I mean, you have to, at the end of the day, if you're going to be, easing travel for people who've been vaccinated, you have to have some kind of foolproof way of ensuring that they've received an approved vaccine, and to cut down on the market for forgeries, which has been a problem in testing. There've been numerous sort of media reports around that you can buy fake PCR tests for $100, $200 and what have you. And of course, when it comes to vaccines, governments want to crack down on that and want to have some kind of system of ensuring that that you got what you said that you had.
Okay, so let me put it like this. What do you think? How realistic is it that we will have a global solution for health passports this year? Is it realistic that we will have one solution accepted globally in
Uh,
2021?
Not one app, obviously, but I think that there will be some standard, that governments accept. So I think that we will see a move towards standardization within 2021 because there is actually no alternative. Because you can't have 40 different apps working 40 different ways. They have to be able to talk to each other, in some shape or form.
Absolutely, can't agree more. We have interesting, it's not a question, more an observation from Clive, who is on the call with us today, who is saying, as individual nations, we are just too nationalistic. The WHO needs to produce a list of approved vaccines, then a similar system to the yellow fever card, remembering that not everyone has a smartphone to download an app. So not vaccination card and then PCR certificate. It is really that simple, yet we seem to make the challenge so complicated. So do you tend to agree with that?
Yeah, I agree. And of course, the WHO has got a list of approved vaccines. So, for example, the AstraZeneca Oxford vaccine is on the WHO's approved list. And I certainly think that, when it comes to a health passport standard, following the example of the WHO is a good benchmark to sort of to follow. Obviously, we mentioned yellow fevers, and one of the things that when I was doing research last year that I was aware of is that there are 20 odd countries which do not follow the WHO's recommendations in terms of yellow fever entries. So even something, and I guess that's a word of warning, that even something which has been with us for so long, yellow fever, passports and certificates been with us for for decades. There are still countries that are out of step, with what the WHO recommends, and so I do, agree with the comment that there's too much of individual countries trying to do things their own way rather than come up with with joint solutions.
All right, good. So let's move to another section. Let me share my screen again, and why don't you share with us what do you think what the industry, what the airports, the airlines, the tourism boards can do now or in the upcoming weeks and months to prepare for what's coming in.
Yeah, so there are really a few things that I think the industry should be doing now. Is that first of all, I still see industry leaders talking about the transmission of the virus, of in-flight transmission being very, very low. Now, obviously, it is important, that there are biosafety measures on board. It is important to make sure that the person who sits next to you is not potentially infectious. It's important both for passengers, it's important for the staff. But I think we need to step back, and that is not why borders are closed. Borders are closed, as we said, because of the transfer of the virus, because of a widespread belief that travel spreads disease. Or as one academic here puts it, when people move, the virus moves. And that is what is driving a lot of what we're seeing right now. And that really has to be confronted head on. We need to show that we are taking people's concerns about the transfer of the virus seriously, and that we have a plan of action to deal with that. And one of the things that I've seen in UK media over the past week is the individual airline CEOs coming together and demanding or asking for a plan of action from the government to reopen borders. I would say a better approach would be, for the industry to put forward a plan of action, so that rather than becoming part of the problem, which we are right now, that we could become part of the solution. That our starting point is, we understand the concerns that there are about the transport of the virus. Obviously, airlines are part of the general societies that they serve. We want to do our part in stopping that. Here's a plan of action that we have that combines obviously biosafety measures, testing, health passports that will allow borders to reopen safely, protect jobs, benefit economies, while also protecting public health. And I think that would be a much more positive approach for the industry to take. Actively promote health ports. As we said previously, there is no way around health passports. You need some safe system of verification to prove that people have had tests and or vaccines. Look at the passenger journey holistically. I saw quite an interesting study that was done by the architecture firm Gensler last year about concerns of travelers. And there was a very, very different statistic when it came to frequent flyers and infrequent flyers. Infrequent flyers were indeed concerned about the person sitting next to you, potentially giving you COVID. But frequent flyers were much less concerned about what happens in aircraft, and we're more concerned about, about public transport to the airport, or social distancing at the airport, or what happens at the other end. So it's important to look at the whole journey holistically and to look at how biosafety measures can be introduced in every single step of the way going forward. Say the summer, I think it makes sense to look at a testing strategy now, especially what we've been talking about, the fact that, that if families want to travel together, some form of testing will have to be in place. So it's important to design that now in February, March, so when it comes to June, July, August, there's something in place. Embrace track and trace and exposure notifications. I mean, over the summer, there were a number of cases here in the UK where where flights arrived back from, in the case I'm thinking from Greece, where 8 people out of 200 had been found to have COVID, and then there was a sort of a scramble to try and locate all those passengers, after they arrived back in Britain. And I think that it would be, one thing that the industry can do is to build in exposure notifications into the airline app that you're able to locate people quickly, and obviously then to spread infection. And then finally, to have a long-term plan. As I said, just like you have a sustainability plan, I think that we will need a long-term pandemic plan, because we said we're in the age of pandemics. This is not going away. There's already talk about about the next pandemic after this, and we need to start thinking about long-term about this. That that even though travel will be possible, it will not happen as it has previously, and concerns about about a repeat of COVID or something like COVID will be with us when all this is over.
So now let's dig a bit deeper about what the industry can do. So very specific questions about the airports, let's say. So do you think that those airports who haven't done it yet, should they be investing in testing centers to provide tests for passengers before departure?
I think that, well, not so much testing centers as testing solutions. I mean, obviously, I'm aware of the fact that that building a lab is a huge undertaking. It's very expensive. You need real estate, you need trained staff, you need supplies. There are solutions out there. Like, to give you an example, Jersey Airport has a mobile testing lab based outside, which processes 2,000 tests a day, which is obviously sort of is enough to to be able to handle the amount of traffic coming to Jersey by air and by sea. So there are solutions like that where you can set up mobile lab. Frankfurt as well, I believe, has got labs in the back of flatbed trucks. That you can roll away once they're no longer needed. But obviously, it is still a massive investment to have something like that. So what you can do is to look at some kind of testing solution where when you introduce mail-in kits. So we are working, for example, with an Austrian company called Test Forward, which is a PCR test, which is saliva and mouthwash based. You could have them sent to the passenger's home, 48, 72 hours beforehand, get them to mail it off. And then inevitably, you will have some passengers who will, who will have gone to take tests, or where the results won't come back in time, who will need something last minute. And there you can offer something last minute at the airport. And rather than offer up a lab, the solution is to offer you to have testing cubes. So there's an Italian-British company called Hyris. There's a Canadian company called Spartan, and they produce cubes just like Mac Minis, and where you can have a PCR test done. Now these are reasonably expensive. You can't handle a high volume, but they are good for last-minute testing. So so for the person who arrives, who for whatever reason wasn't able to take a test but needs to fly, you have some kind of solution there that you're able to offer that to the passenger.
And what is the basis of those tests? Are they PCR or antigen or?
They are. So the ones that I'm talking about from Hyris, and Hyris makes a cube that is it's a PCR test, and it's a cube that looks a little bit like if you remember the Mac Mini computers, you hook it up to a laptop. It does take 2-3 hours, so it's not fast, but it is something you can offer there in point of care, and it's something where you don't have to have a lab, in the background to be able to do it.
Yeah, but still much faster than the usual PCR test, which takes around 8 to 12 hours to get the result. So
yeah, and there are, as I said, there are questions about volume. I mean, you can't process thousands of people at once through this, but it is good for for a backup for people who need a last minute test for whatever reason that may be.
Okay, let's talk about airlines a little bit. You mentioned already Delta today as one of the best examples of how to deal with all what COVID is putting into our way. Any other examples or any specific ideas what every airline should do? For example, if they want to have more customers this summer, if they want to make those customers feel safer.
Yeah, so I can think of sort of Wizz Air and EasyJet to think of two European LCC examples. I mean, in the autumn, when we were still able to fly, EasyJet and Wizz Air were actually offering meal and test kits to customers in the UK at a discount. I think Wizz Air's price was about £90 and EasyJet's price was about £85. It's still expensive, but it's a lot cheaper than the walk-in lab cost of about £130, £140. And that is one thing that sort of the airlines can be doing, is partnering up with test companies and potentially subsidizing the cost of the test, and making it easier for passengers to be able to get a test and be able to travel.
Right. And what about the tourism boards, destinations? I'm sure there is something they can do as well to be more attractive or to inspire travelers to go exactly to their destinations and to feel safe at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, there's a number of of programs that are in place. That is that a number of tourism boards are giving hospitality venues, so hotels and restaurants and venues, giving them COVID safe certificates. In the same way that when you go to a restaurant, you can see a sanitation certificate telling you that someone has inspected the restaurant, telling you that it's clean, that someone has gone to verify that that venue is following the correct procedures. And I'm aware that the World Tourism Council does have a scheme in place like that. And that's something that I think that can be done just to provide very visible reassurance the place in which you're staying in has been vetted, does follow certain procedures. I mean, the Maldives actually is a very good example. That the Maldives does have a scheme where resorts have to register. I believe the cost is $50,000, and have to have certain measures in place, which includes training for staff, in terms of use of PPE equipment, rules in terms of social distancing, and an emergency plan of what happens if you have a guest who's caught COVID, and some place for that person to isolate.
Good. We have a question here from Yuriko Lima, quite long one, so I'm not going to go through the whole one, but what he's asking is also about the MICE tourism, which obviously is one of the most profitable and was generating lots of revenues and GDP all together within tourism industry. So what eventually he's asking is if you are aware that travel agencies are working together with other companies and even governments in order to counter this trend and already real and to promote tourism before companies and individuals.
I have to say it's something that I'm not, that's not really my area, and that I'm not that aware of. So it's I hesitate to answer that particular question, but I'm sure there's other guests here who were more more up on that particular aspect.
Yeah. Obviously, we saw some events happening, for example, in Dubai with keeping the distances and everybody wearing masks. Yeah, difficult to say.
I will mention one example, which some of you may have seen in the media, which is happening in Singapore, and that some of you may have seen the coverage that the Changi Airport, they set up an event space where you can fly in, where you can meet people, and you don't have to go into quarantine. And if you look at the video, the way that it works is that there's like conference rooms, and you sit on one side of the room at the table, and there's a glass screen, and the local delegates sit on the other side. So you're face to face, but there's no, but there is a a protective barrier between you. If you pass documents through, then it goes through some kind of sanitation filter to sanitize the documents before they go back and forwards. It's fairly strange. I mean, if I'm honest, it reminded me, it looked a little bit like prison visiting hours.
That's what I wanted to say.
So
yeah.
It's like in prison, you see like the glass screen in front of you, and the rest, obviously in a much more comfortable environment. But I mean, our CEO Shashank, who's from Singapore, and get a very interesting perspective. He said it's not so much for you to meet countries in Singapore, but it establishes Singapore and Changi Airport as somewhere where, let's say that if you're in Australia, and you need to meet a supplier from Ireland, for lack of a better word, that there's some kind of central point where you can do that. When you have some kind of safe space, COVID safe space where you can meet, where you can sign documents, where you can see someone face to face in some kind of form. So I thought that was an interesting development, and it'll be interesting to see if other airports and other conference centres introduce something similar.
We're going to be closing today's session very shortly. So before we say goodbye, and I also have still 2 more polls for everybody who's with us. Dirk, can you please summarize what we have been discussing today, and as an answer to the ultimate question, so how will we fly this summer?
My personal view is that this summer will be a modest improvement on the last summer. We will see much as we did last summer, where there was a certain amount of short-term holidays, short-haul holidays, short-haul vacations that were popular, that were possible. We will see the same again this year. What the difference I hope will be from this year to last year is last year we had border measures changing very, very quickly and with very, very little notice. With the vaccination program increasing and with COVID rates going down, I would hope to see that we see less of that, because obviously one of the main barriers to travel is uncertainty. You're going to think twice about booking a holiday or vacation to Spain, for example, if then you arrive and then you're worried about the fact that, will the rules change when you come back, and will you be forced to go into 14 days quarantine? So hopefully there will be an end to that, and there'll be a lot more certainty than there was last year. And that will, of course, in itself be a major improvement.
Yeah, definitely makes at least 2 of us, I'm sure everybody on the call agrees that, more uncertainty is definitely not what we need to make this summer a better one. By the way, what about you, Dirk? When do you think you will hop on the plane next time?
I would hope to be I'm due for my vaccination, because I'm in a priority group here. I'm due for my vaccination in the next 2 to 3 weeks, and if that's the case, that would mean I'm fully vaccinated by the end of May, by early June. So in my head, I certainly had it, that I'd be able to fly by June or July. Obviously, that's not up to me; that's up to governments. But one of the things that I'm looking out for, as being based here in the UK, is the possibility of a UK-US travel corridor, because of course in the USA also, vaccination rates are quite high, and we do a lot of business in North America in terms of our testing business. So that is what I'm hoping for would be the first place I'll be able to travel to, at some point in the summer.
Dirk, thank you so much for all your insights, for all your time, for the opportunity to listen to you. And all of you out there, if you are not subscribed to Dirk's newsletter, definitely do that, as basically on a daily basis. Is that right? On a daily basis, you are sharing all the news. Yeah, more or less on a daily basis, all the news related to travel in and air travel in part vaccinated world as we see it. So thanks a lot. And before we say goodbye, let me share a couple of invitations with you today, also for the upcoming events here at us from AviaDev. So this Friday, my colleague John Hubble will have another an audience with live AviaDev podcast with Sanjeev Gadia, CEO of Astral Aviation. So that's this Friday. Feel free to join us for this session. We also have on the 18th of March, we are doing an event for DoHop about virtual interlining airline partnerships, the road to recovery, which we are, as I said, doing together with our partner DoHop. So that's 18th of March. Then in April, 15th of April, we are doing another event with another partner of ours, that's Navpass, on how to efficiently increase revenues from overflight fee collection, a topic which we don't discuss a lot, but definitely very interesting one. And our partners from Navpass, they have very unique solution how they can help basically every single government to improve this overflight fee collection. And last but definitely not least, this a couple of days ago, we have shared the big news about our African event. So AviaDev Africa will happen this year online on 9 till 11th June. registration is already open, so feel free to register. We have almost 25 airlines are already confirmed. Same as for AviaDev Europe last year, we will be using special software which will enable you guys to do your one-to-one meetings, one-to-one route development meetings, one-to-one meetings between suppliers and all the airlines and the airport and the tourism boards. So that looks like it's a long way to go, but definitely 9 till 11 June, save the date, and you can also already register for AviaDev Africa 2021, which is being organized, of course, with our great partners from Rabinala airports in Madagascar. Also, last but not least, let me remind you that we as AviaDev, we are here to support you, support our community. So whatever you have on your mind, if you are thinking about having your own podcast or doing your own webinar, you are thinking about providing an online training course, or you want to showcase your product or service with our community, or you want to do any kind of another digital events, roundtable discussions, video interviews, we are here to support you. We are here to help you, our community, both in Europe and in Africa. So feel free to reach out to us. Everything is on aviadevdigital.com. There are contacts to our CEO, John Howell. There is my contact. Definitely also also follow us on LinkedIn, AviaDev Africa, AviaDev Europe. Follow me personally, follow John, and stay tuned. We are, as I mentioned, we are coming up with more events for you, and we are all hoping for a good summer. I hope today's session was valuable for you. So till we see each other again, stay safe, stay healthy, all the best. Take care.